Welcome back to another Reaper blog video. Today we're talking about what's new in Reaper 6.43. There isn't just one big important feature in this update. There's a bunch of little things that are important and useful. Let's take a look. For projects, hold Shift to open Recent Project in New Project tab. One of the simplest additions and probably one of the most useful additions in a really long time. Going to the File menu, going to Recent Project tabs. In this list, we have this hint up at the top. Hold Shift to open in New Project tab. So I can just hold Shift and click on any project to load that project in a new tab, preserving my original project. And you can see here, I've got two tabs. First for unsaved project, which is my empty default template, and then the project that I opened. So before, you used to have to go to File, New Project tab, that would load your default template, then go back up to File, and then Recent Project. And you know, it's just a pain. This is probably the most seamless way you can add in that function. Opening in a new project tab should have been here long ago, but it's awesome that we have that now. And the next thing we'll talk about briefly is CAF support. So in this version, they have support for CAF, core audio format. This used to be a Mac-only format. I think Apple loops, like the GarageBand and Logic built-in library, I think it's that format. But to be honest with you, I haven't really used that format at all. I pretty much stick with WAV and MP3. Let's have a look here. We can import it just by drag and drop, or by browsing in the Media Explorer. We could also render files to CAF format. So if we go to Format in the Render to File window and CAF, which is a bit depth from 8 to 64-bit, including markers, embedding the tempo, and that's about it. People were asking for this. It's not a feature that I am probably going to use. If this is something that you need more information, just let me know and I'll investigate this further. For video, add OpenGL display support for Windows and Linux, and fix audio encoding with ffmpeg 4.4. I've actually recorded a separate video about this, and this is already out on my channel. If you're using Reaper for making videos, whether you're on Windows or Linux, there's two functions that are important, and you should have a look at that. Again, separate video. This stuff doesn't really matter on Mac. You're probably going to use the built-in AV Foundation encoder, but ffmpeg is optionally installed and could be useful for certain formats. One other video-related feature to mention is normalization is now supported for video formats. So whether you're in the render window or batch converter, you should be able to now normalize the audio that goes into that video file. We've already talked about render normalization in several videos now, so just reference to those things that it now applies to video. For sample rate conversion, add r8brain free mode courtesy of Voxengo, reorder and rename various modes, and improve dynamic varispeed playback quality. So we're going to head over to project settings. We're going to look at the playback resample mode, render resample mode here. So this list has changed. There's now one new, better one, which is r8brain free. And this is generally what you'll probably be using most of the time, unless you know that there's a specific sound you can get from some of the others. And we'll just change that in my default for both of those. And then these quality levels have scaled down. So what used to be the extreme setting is now the very slow setting. So these go in order of worst to best. What is resampling? That's when you take a file, let's say it's a 96 kilohertz file, you drop that into your timeline, you're playing back at 44.1, there's some math involved to get that to play back correctly, to get it to play at the correct rate, and to play back with the correct pitch. There's some math that goes along in there, and that's these playback resample mode or algorithms. Voxengo makes a very great quality free option, and that used to be a standalone app, and now it's built into Reaper. Very convenient to use, seamless. You don't need to go through any extra steps with that. This affects the project. Playing back audio when you're rendering audio, like if you glue an item and it's converted to your project rate. It's also in the render window. So because I set that in the project settings, it's now set this here as well. So this only comes into effect when you are playing back files that are above or below your project sample rate, or when you're rendering and you're going above or below your project sample rate. So 48 kilohertz project, converting that down to 44.1, you want to have the best quality resample algorithm possible. This update changes how macOS versions are distributed. There's now 3 flavors, they say. Universal for x86-64 plus ARM64. x86-64 optimized for Mac 10.14 and earlier, and also an i386 or 32-bit. On the download page, on the Mac side, there are several links here. So we've got the Mac OS Intel optimized for 10.14 and earlier, and then we've got the Mac OS 10.15 Plus, which is a universal app which will automatically detect whether you have an Intel or ARM processor, and it will run a optimized version. And if you have a really old Mac, you can use the 32-bit version. Most users are not going to be using the 32-bit version. Anyone on any of the newer systems can use either of these, but I think they want you to use the universal. I'm actually using the 64-bit Intel version just because it has much better third-party plugin support. It's what I've been using for the past year. I keep checking on the ARM version and this new universal version, and it just doesn't have the plugin support, and also my theme looks a bit different. I prefer the look of the other one. And I want to just show you here, you can actually have both installed, and it's okay to rename these. So this is the universal download. If I go to Get Info, there's actually an option to open using Rosetta. So I have a M1 Mac Mini, that's an ARM processor. And by default, when I run this, it's going to load the ARM version of Reaper. If I click on the box, open using Rosetta, it will load the Intel version of Reaper. But this Intel version of Reaper is different than the other download. When I'm talking about plugin compatibility, either some plugins that I have installed just don't appear at all, or some of them have to be bridged. And the bridged puts them into a separate memory space, and they're kind of like running as a separate app. And this just kind of gets in the way for me. The UI isn't embedded like a normal plugin. And so I kind of made a list here of plugins that I have installed that just run completely normal. They didn't crash on me instantly. Reaper could find them easily, that sort of thing. Then there's a bunch of plugins that needs to be run bridged, which is that separate window, like I said before, similar to bridging 32-bit plugins. And, it's just ugly and clumsy, and I don't like it. There's also VST2 native plugins. A few of them showed up and worked perfectly fine. XLN Audio's RC20, and then bridged. All Isotope plugins had to be bridged, and I hated that. So actually, a lot of the smaller companies like Calum Audio, Audio Damage, Audio Thing, Tokyo Dawn Labs, all their plugins, they work natively as VST3 on Mac ARM, and they work great. But in a lot of the other plugin companies like Native Instruments and IK Multimedia and Isotope, they are still not ready. Arturia has some of their instruments supported on Mac ARM, but then their effects are not, except for their very newest one, which only came out like a week ago. So it's still kind of a mess, and that's why I just say use the Intel version, even though the performance isn't quite the same. I think once everything is native ARM, it will work even better, but you can get really great results using the Intel version, as I have been for the past year. So hopefully that information is helpful for the M1 users watching. For the Media Explorer, add action to focus search field, Control F, Command F by default, support editing some metadata for RPP files. When dragging media into project, respect Media Explorer setting to preserve pitch when changing rate or tempo matching. So let's bring up the Media Explorer. And so if I've got a file here selected and I press Command F, that's going to move my cursor over to the text box, which you could see the cursor flashing there now. And if I start typing, let's say .rpp, enter, and that's going to sort by .rpp. And if my text field looks a little different than yours, that's because I have the option path dropdown box turned off. And so there's usually two boxes. Over on the right, you've got the search, and on the left, you have the path. When you have path turned off, then you just have the search. For me, that works a little bit better, especially when the Media Explorer is kind of shrunk down, right beside the mixer or something. So I can press Command F, search for .rpp. I can grab one of these RPPs. I can right click, and I can go to Edit Metadata Tag. I've got title, artist, and description. Title could be Awesome Project. Under artist, I could do John Tidy. Description, this could be, let's say, guitar recording. Yeah, I'll just write that metadata to media. And so that's resaved that project. Let's open that project. And this is just basically an empty project. But if I go to the project settings and the notes page, I see that Awesome Project, John Tidy, and guitar recording was added into the notes page. So I did that through the Media Explorer without opening the project, without opening up project settings. So that's how that works. So to show you the rate change function, I've got a file here. Let's start with tempo match off. So keep in mind what that pitch is, and we'll go to tempo match on. It's a lower pitch to match. Change this to half. Or to double. If we right click on here and preserve pitch when tempo matching or changing play rate, turn that on. And now it's kept the same pitch as original. So here's off. And here's on. So it's just kind of changing the space between notes, compressing it using an algorithm. But we can change this to like 1.5. Makes sense. And if we import this, that's going to sound exactly the same. It's going to match our tempo. Although I did put it at 1.5, so it doesn't match exactly. But yeah, it's following this setting to preserve pitch. So I'll just uncheck that and import this again. And so it's following this preserve pitch function. For razor edits, add option in Preferences, Project, Media Item Defaults to overlap and crossfade when finalizing razor edits. So here we are in Reaper Preferences, Project, Media Item Defaults. So we've got this option, overlap and crossfade items when splitting and setting a length. So we'll enable that. My default is 5 milliseconds, but just so this is completely obvious to everyone at home here, what this looks like, we're going to set this to 0.25 or 1/4 of a second. And we're also going to set this to overlap and crossfade media when finalizing razor edits. It's also going to use this default crossfade shape. And we'll just hit apply, move this out of the way. Make a new razor edit by holding down the Alt key, right dragging. And if I move this over, you can see that it's put in new fades. So if I split an item with the S key, it's going to put in this 250 millisecond crossfade. If I make a razor edit and then move that somewhere, that's going to put in a 250 millisecond crossfade in and out of that item. And so let's repeat this. Let's take bars. Let's take this 1 bar section from 3 tracks, and I will drag them over here. And then as soon as I let go, you can see that it's added in fades there. All right, so let's undo that. And I will turn off the overlap and crossfade function here, but we'll keep on overlap and crossfade media when finalizing razor edits. So I'm just going to repeat the same process. I'm going to drag this razor edit over to here, and when I let go, is finalize that razor edit, put in fades in and out. And with the overlap example, doing this, dragging over, that's put in the crossfades. And if I zoom in here and do a manual split with S, there's no fade there. So these options are actually independent. You don't have to have these on for your manual edits, but if you're doing a razor edit and you want to have that crossfade automatic, you can have that. In the render window, there's a new option to automatically write peak loudness statistics into rendered file metadata. I'll show you that in the render window. So if my settings are for WAV files, up at the top there's this calculate and embed peak loudness values checkbox there. And if we are in the BWF scheme, we can see that there are several different loudness options, and this will automatically fill that in. For media items, multiple notes windows can be open at the same time. The action to open the item notes acts on all selected media items and closes notes windows if they are open already, and support resizing item notes window, support word wrap in media item notes. Item notes isn't something I use too frequently, but you can access that by a right-click, item settings, and item notes. So this can be open here, and I'll just repeat that, item settings, item notes. And so I've got a second window, and I'll just repeat that on these two selected items. Right-click, item settings, item notes. And so I have 4 item notes windows open. All right, so the action to show and hide notes is this show notes for items. And so you do need to have the item selected to run that, but it's pretty simple. So let's just add this to, let's say, F8. Okay, and so if I have this item selected, I can just easily bring that forward and backwards. When this is open, we can resize this. We can word wrap. Yeah, pretty simple. And again, I can select multiple items, press that key, and then those item notes windows will pop up. For tracks, they've renamed the track playback offset setting to media playback offset. And if you don't know what that is, there is a way to delay the audio coming out of a track by some amount, or actually offset it to be ahead of everything else. So if we click on the routing button for any track, we now see this option here labeled media playback offset. This used to be track playback offset or track offset, and this can be plus or minus some amount of samples or milliseconds. They renamed this to kind of clear up any confusion over whether it's the output of the track effects chain, the input of the track effects chain, or what. But this actually will offset the output of the item. So whether it's audio or MIDI, it will play that earlier or later based on this number. And one example of why you would use that is if you have string samples playing out of an instrument like Contact, where it has a slow envelope or a slow attack to start that note, you want to edit your MIDI kind of on the grid, but then you offset this by, let's say, 100 milliseconds. So the notes trigger the VST instrument 100 milliseconds earlier. When the beat hits on the grid, the notes are already kind of up to their full attack position. And you can also use this to adjust the timing of things, but just remember that this is the media being shifted, not the output of the effects. Another reason this is an important change is that with automation, that's not delayed by the media playback offset. So you need to make sure that if you're editing automation by eye or by grid on the timeline, that your media item matches that, or you manually offset that automation, if that makes sense. So that's one of the reasons why this was changed. And the last thing I'll mention here is VSTs. Keep full VST3 GUID for REAPER-vstshells.ini and REAPER-vstshells.ini. Hide and allow rescan of shell plugin instances which previously failed to scan. So this is all about the waves shell file, the way that waves VSTs are scanned and everything like that. A lot of people have issues with authorizations after an update. They buy a new plugin, they install it, can't find it in Reaper. They have to do a full clear cache and rescan, and then sometimes they have to repair the installation in Wave Central. And so this is hopefully a way to reduce all of that annoyance and just, have it work like other plugins. I don't know. I don't have any Waves plugins installed on any of my computers, but hopefully this works better. And if this does work better or worse or anything like that, let me know in the comments. Share what you know about this feature in the comments. And if you see any questions in the comments that you're able to answer, have a conversation, help people out. So that's it for this Reaper update video. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you've learned something. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Support the Reaper blog through Patreon, and visit reaperblog.net for a lot more tutorials.